she's a witty and energetic and engaging speaker, and she's also a best-selling author. She's a source of inspiration to transform hopelessness into purpose, exhaustion into playfulness, and depression into meaning. Her vision is to create a world where everyone believes in themselves. That's a great brand statement, isn't it? To create a world where everyone believes in themselves. But it took a painful layoff and a life-pausing illness for this former director to shift her self-sabotaging ways. She devoted herself to healing and studying the profound change in her mindset, reclaim her own life, and start dreaming again. So she's author of #1 bestseller, You Are Worthy Even When You Believe Otherwise, a guide for the overwhelmed perfectionist. And because of that, she's appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show. She's a hiking enthusiast, an adventurous traveler, and an avid reader. Julie, thank you so much for coming and sharing.
Thank you. Oh, am I on? I am on. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Well, I want to welcome you here this morning. How many people are glad they got out of bed and came here? Yes. You are going to have some hope preached into you today. Now, I am here today because most of us at some point in our life have wondered, do you see me? Do you hear me? Do I matter? And when the answer is no to these questions, we feel like we aren't making a difference at home or even in our communities. In fact, a lot of times we just feel like we really don't matter. Now, some of you may not realize that you're thinking this because it might be buried way deep down in your subconscious, running your life unknowingly. And some of you might think you're the only one. I used to think the same thing. And what I found out and what I learned was that I was in good company and lots of it. And there were several things that led me down this road. Because you see, I was the director at a software company. I don't know how you get from there to here, but that's what happened for me. And when I was the director of a software company, I was the token female on the executive team. And there were a lot of days where I felt like my ideas weren't heard, and that it didn't really matter what I did because no one was listening to what I had to say. This was a really common feeling for me when I had a corporate job. And I had a lot of days where I felt like I didn't even know why I bothered. And what led me to feel this way? Well, there were things like red tape, not enough budget or staff, deadlines that were unrealistic, and of course, the day I was invited to leave my job. Do any of these sound familiar to you? Do any of these make you feel like you might not be making a difference? It's exactly how I felt the day I walked out the door. But I have some really good news for you today, because while you thought that these types of constraints were what made you feel the way you did, whether you were making a difference or even have any value in the world, they actually have nothing to do with it. And I'm going to challenge you today to view where you get your value and about the difference that you make in the world. Now, we all have choices in every single day. In fact, you made a choice to come here today. You went through all the traffic and you came here today for yourself. You also came here for the other people in this room. It's the choices that we make that determine the difference we make in the world and how we feel about the value that we bring. Now, you may be wondering, how is it that we even get to the point or to come to the conclusion that we don't make a difference. It starts way before our adulthood. It starts in our childhood. And we all had well-meaning people in our lives that instilled beliefs into us. Some of them propel us forward, and some of them hold us back. Maybe you heard some of the same ones I did. Life is hard. Life is hard. Money doesn't grow on trees. Do you need it or do you want it? I wanted both. I felt both were right, but my parents never saw it that way. Now, my parents must have told me 1,000,000 times, if not 2,000,000 times, that nothing in life worth having comes easy. This was not my experience as a child. Well, okay, coming through the birth canal was a bit tough, but once I was out, all I had to do was cry, and someone would pick me up, cuddle me, change me, or feed me. Pretty easy, right? Getting good grades, sports, making new friends as I got older, all easy. But they told me so many times that I decided, maybe I better watch their lives and find out why they keep telling me this. And guess what I learned? Their lives were hard. They worked all day. They shuffled us around to our activities after school and in the evening. They made sure we were clothed and fed, went to bed at a decent time, did our homework. And then they would fall into bed every night exhausted, only to get up and do it all again the next day. And so from my observation, I perceived that as an adult, having a career and a family was really hard. But don't worry, it was worth having. Now, if this was the truth, that meant that my career up the corporate ladder had to be really difficult to obtain. And what did I do to make it worthy of obtaining? I became a workaholic. Working 60 to 80 hours a week, traveling more than 50% of the time. In fact, I can tell you exactly what night I got pregnant with my son because I was only home 2 nights that month. Yay me. Now, when I became an adult, it was, this thought process that my parents taught me, nothing in life worth having comes easy, it got stored into my subconscious. That's an adult thing. I don't have to do that as a child. It's an adult thing. And so when I became an adult, it was like there was this switch that got flipped. And my childhood experience of everything in life worth having comes easy switched and flipped to nothing in life worth having comes easy. Now, not only, that was stored way down in my subconscious running my life, and I didn't even realize it until the day I was invited to leave my job. That's not the only place that we get messages. We are also bombarded with messages daily, 24/7 daily. What happens? This is a typical day. The alarm goes off. You roll over. You pick up your phone, and you start scrolling through social media. Now, some of you may not know this, but the first 15 minutes of the day is when your brain has the least amount of resources. So it's really easy to start comparing yourself to everybody else. And so you look at everybody else's lives, and yours just doesn't quite measure up. Then what do? You scroll through the news. Now you feel fearful, hopeless, and out of control. Then you hop in the car, you turn on the radio, and you listen to advertising. And advertising tells you if you're not fat-free, gray-free, or wrinkle-free, you are not enough. And you walk into an interview, and you see that everybody in the room interviewing for the same job is 10 years younger than you. It's no wonder you feel like you don't make a difference. Now, what happens with all this negative messaging? All this negative messaging puts what I call fear, uncertainty, and doubt into your mind. FUD. FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And it impacts your relationships and your health and your overall happiness. Now, how does it impact your health? Well, did you know that negativity actually attacks your muscles? Did you know the ticker, the heart, is a muscle? It also breaks down the molecular structure of your body, which means you age faster and you shorten your lifespan if you live in that cycle of FUD. Now, in your relationships, if you bring FUD into your relationships, what happens is it gets harder and harder to connect, and eventually you give up, and the relationship gets severed. And what happens? How do we react to this? We feel defeated. We can become cynical. We start focusing on everything that's going wrong, and then we start kicking our accomplishments to the curb. Well, let me share you a story about one of my accomplishments that I kicked to the curb. Several years ago, I decided that I was going to run a half marathon, 13.1 miles. Honey, I am a 2-mile girl and out. 2 miles and I am out of here. I don't know how I was going to do this, but I decided I was going to challenge myself and I was going to do it. I actually followed the training plan to the T. Race day came. I got on the bus, and while everyone else is sipping their coffee trying to wake up, I'm like, oh, we're going to run 13.1 miles today. I am stoked. I don't know why the rest of those people weren't there if they weren't that excited, but I was excited. And I was sure that I was going to run that race in 2.5 hours or less. Got up to the start line, took off running, got in my pace, doing really well. About mile 6. I get this really hard, deep pain in my left side. I know what to do. This is just a side ache. If I slow down my pace and I take in deeper breaths, that side ache will go away. Oh, contraire. It did not. In fact, I think I must have looked a bit gray because one of the race monitors looked at me and goes, "Are you okay?" Now, had he been in a car, I probably would have jumped in the back seat, but he was on a bicycle. And so I gave him that big old toothy grin. 2 thumbs up. I'm good. I wasn't good. And about this time, a marathoner went running by me. These are the people that left just a mere 20 minutes before us and ran twice as far. Oh, heck no, I am not coming in after a marathoner. And I started running again. But the pain was just too great. In the last 3 miles, I pretty much walked most of it. And I looked up at the clock, and it said 3 hours. 3 hours. I felt defeated. I felt like I had let myself down. And for the next 3 days, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you this, for the next 3 days, I let that little voice in my head tear me down and beat me up because I did not run the perfect race with the perfect time. Talk about kicking an accomplishment to the curb. And when I got laid off, I did the same thing. I started beating myself up. I felt like a failure. I felt like I had let my family down, and I felt like I was all alone. I would have loved to have a meeting like this. And when I focused on that one thing that I considered to be a failure, I kicked all my 25 years of accomplishments and success right out the door with one event. I started telling myself things like, I don't matter. But today, what I want you to do is I want to challenge you to change the way you look at things. Because one of my mentors, Wayne Dyer, says when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so when you look at your choices, you can start to see how they impact the difference you make and the value that you bring to the world. Now, did y'all know that McDonald's has 7 magic words? Would you like fries with your order? Now, those 7 magic words, they actually impact the bottom line by millions of dollars. They impact how many fry makers are needed and whether they have enough, they can earn enough money to go to college. It impacts the potato farmer and whether he can feed his family. It impacts the trucker who delivers those potatoes and whether he can pay his bills. Now, while these 7 little words may seem insignificant, they impact the world. And you too impact the world with your words and with your actions. Every person that you talk to, every problem that you solve, every job that you apply for, every interview that you bravely go to, you impact the world. And the choice that you have is whether you're going to impact it negatively or positively. Now, some of you may be thinking, I don't impact the world, not right now. But you do. And I want to show you how to make the shift. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to give you 3 tools today. These 3 tools are in the back of my book. I have a whole section in the back of my book on how you can make the shift. And the first tool I'm going to tell you about is the turnaround. Now, what this does is this helps you retrain your brain to think in the positive. Now, here's what happens when I got laid off. Oh, honey, I went down into Negativeville so fast that I had residents there for quite some time. And it's really easy to be negative when you're in that situation. I felt defeated. I felt like that failure. And I told myself things like, I'm not worthy. Nobody's going to want me now that I'm unemployed. And how am I even going to explain that in an interview? And I told myself I didn't make a difference and I was not hireable. Wow. Talk about being your own best friend. My emotions went from indignant and ticked off to utter sadness. I was all over the board. My husband didn't even know how to deal with me. He was, I don't even know who you are. You need to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and get back out there. And it's like, no, nobody wants me. After several weeks of self-loathing and realizing that eventually the money was going to run out, I decided that I had to be vigilant about minding my mind. And the turnaround actually will take your negative self-talk and turn it into positive affirmations. So I want to walk through this with you. Each of you got a handout, correct? If you open that up and you look at the first page, it says, the second page, it says turnaround. I'm going to tell you how the turnaround works. It has 5 steps. The first step is to listen to your self-talk. Now, this is not an invitation to berate yourself or beat yourself up. This is just so you can hear what you're saying to yourself. Here's what I found out. I couldn't believe that I was tending my negativity garden as much as I was tending it. I definitely was not my own best friend. So the first step, listen to what it is. It's just to become conscious about what you're saying. The second step is to write down any self-talk that is negative. Write it down on paper. That stuff does not belong up here. It belongs on paper, paper that you can burn, that you can shred, that you can wad up and do whatever you want with it. Put it on paper. The third step is to use the turnaround. Now, these thoughts that I have in my mind, about negative self-talk, that's your inner bully. And she speaks out of fear, out of just plain and simple fear. So When you hear one of those inner bully thoughts, write it down. Step 3, turn it around. Your inner bully, how do I say this? Your inner bully will brainwash you into believing you're not enough. She will berate you and tear you down until you just don't even recognize the person you're looking at in the mirror anymore. You want to get her under control because she will hold you back with her stinking thinking. What you really want to replace her with is a voice that is your cheerleader, that lifts you up when you're down, the voice that will remind you that you have choices anytime you have adversity in your life. And that voice is your inner wisdom. Now, I want to tell you that when people would come to me and commiserate with me, of course, they would also then share their advice on how I could make myself a better interviewer or a better option for the company that I wanted to go apply to. And I would listen to what they would say, and as soon as they were out of sight, that little voice, that inner bully voice, would take me down the rabbit hole faster than you could cross a race car across the finish line. And the rabbit hole is not a fun place to be. But what's really important to know about this is that I let this one event wipe out that 25 years of success and accomplishments. So when you get her under control, you want to get her under control with that cheerleader, that will lift you up, one that will remind you you have choices in how you react. And that choice is what I call your inner wisdom. And your inner wisdom will always be your best friend. She is the one that combats the inner bully. If you look at the page 2, you will see here that I have all of the steps. So let's take an example. I took one, I'm not hireable. That's my inner bully. What does my inner wisdom say? My inner wisdom says I am hireable. In fact, I like to take it one step further. And I like to say, they would be lucky to have me on their team. Now, that was what my inner wisdom would say. Now, if you're anything like me, and you've been telling yourself this inner bully stuff for so long, for me it was decades, you're not going to believe it. You certainly aren't going to believe that inner wisdom. What you want to do is you got to put down step 4. And step 4 is where you get the supporting evidence. It's the why your inner wisdom turnaround could be correct. I don't care if you have to go back to 3rd grade. You know, in 3rd grade, I was a multiplication whiz. I'm sure that is supporting evidence for something. But I don't care if you have to go back to 3rd grade to find out why that statement might be true. But when you start writing enough of those statements, you will start to believe your turnaround. Remember, I didn't believe what my parents said, that life is hard or nothing in life worth having comes easy. I didn't believe that as a child, but I did hear it enough times that I did believe it. And it impacted my life. Let's do one together. If you're feeling like I don't make a difference right now, that would be your inner bully statement. What would your inner wisdom say? Can someone shout out an inner wisdom turnaround to I don't make a difference? Someone shout one out. I make a difference with my abilities. You can write that down here on your sheet. I make a difference with my abilities. Yes. I make a difference by changing the world. I made a difference this morning. I let someone in traffic. I made a difference to him. Not so much the guy behind me. All right. Why could that be true? Well, Why is it that you make a difference with your abilities? Why is that true? When has that been true in your life? You're thinking. Okay, someone tell me a reason why that could be true in your life.
Because you can help others with your abilities.
You can help others with your abilities. You could write that down as one of your whys.
You mentor, train, and those that are less experienced,
Right.
bring them to their full potential.
You offer your services to others in need, even though you feel like you're the only one in need right now. You offer your services to others in need, and you make a difference in their lives. This woman here, I talked to her before the thing. She teaches Financial Peace University. That's a huge program, and it's an amazing program. And I was telling her about how our son, we didn't think that he was listening to us when we were trying to teach him about money in high school. You know, that teenager aloof thing. And he got to college, and the second month he was in college, he calls me up and he goes, I opened a Roth IRA today. Holy cow, he was listening. Made a difference in his life, just didn't realize it. It was a delayed difference. All right. Now, if you notice here on your paper, there's one that says write your own. All right? I want you to think of the first inner bully statement that you say to yourself and write it down. I am not going to ask you to share it. Okay, so this is just for you. Go ahead and write it down. The first thing that comes to your mind. Once you have it written down, raise your hand. Some of you are quick. You must be related to me. Raise your hand if you have yours written down. All right. I want you to write down an inner wisdom turnaround to that. Make it as simple as possible. Go ahead and write it down. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to do that. Does everybody have one? I'll give you 10 more seconds. What time did we start, Travis? 9? Okay. All right, here's the 5th step to the turnaround. Practice, practice, practice. I don't care if you say it 100 times a day. Write it on your mirror with a dry erase marker. Say it every morning and every night. Put it on 3x5 cards. Put it on the dash of your car. God knows we all sit on enough stoplights where we could read it. I call those the vacation stoplights. I just don't remember paying for it. You can also write it down every day. Put it into your memory. When you write, things get into your mind. All right. Practice, practice, practice. So here's what the turnaround does. It retrains your brain to think in the positive. Does anybody have any questions about the turnaround? This one tool right here will totally change the way that you interview, the way that you look at yourself, and the value that you bring to the world. Now, the second tool that I want to bring to you is an attitude of gratitude. Oh yeah, I hear it. I have nothing to be grateful for right now. That's exactly how I felt. But this is what gratitude does for you. It retrains your brain to scan the world for the positive. We have the news already scanning the world for the negative. This combats that. Gratitude combats that. Now, I didn't feel like I had much to be grateful for when I was invited to leave my job. But what I did is I grabbed hold of it like there was no tomorrow. When I was trying to build myself up and get back out there and find a job, gratitude became my lifeline. It didn't matter how glum the situation was, I could look around me and see things to be grateful for. I was grateful that I had peanut butter and jelly. I was grateful that I had a bed to sleep in because we were on the verge of foreclosure in our house. Yay! And I just realized that if I was more grateful, that I would have more optimism and that I would be a better candidate when I went into an interview. How do you implement gratitude into your life? You can start first thing in the morning. Instead of picking up the phone, list three things you're grateful for. Because when you do that, you're choosing to start your day on a positive note. Make gratitude the first topic of conversation at the dinner table. Start a gratitude journal. Go for a gratitude walk. I still use gratitude walks like mad. Whenever am working on a problem and I get really frustrated, that's my time to turn away, push away from the desk and go for a gratitude walk. Because what that does is it opens up my mind to possibilities and optimism. Gratitude retrains your brain to scan the world for the positive. Use it as your lifeline. If you'll notice on your sheet, did we really start at 9? Do I have just 10 more minutes? Yes. Holy cow. Okay. I have 15. Okay, great. If you look at the back of your sheet here, where it says attitude of gratitude, I want you to write down one thing that you're grateful for right now. Write it down. Okay. Does everybody have something they're grateful for? Does anyone want to share what they're grateful for? You raised your hand. What are you grateful for today?
Physical health.
Physical health. Anybody else? That's a good one. Yes.
Supportive friends and family.
Supportive friends and family. My life. I have one. Oh, your wife. Give me her name and number. I'll call her later.
It's the same thing.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so I have one. I'm grateful I got here. You know, I live in a small town of 15,000 people. Your traffic in Austin is horrendous. I'm glad I got here safely. Anybody else want to share one? Yes.
I'm still happy that my car is still running.
His car is still running. No kidding. It could be overheating in this heat. All right. The next tool I want to give you is self-care. Now, here's what self-care is. It retrains your brain to see that you matter. It's the greatest gift that you can give to yourself and to your family. Now, a lot of us were taught that it's selfish, but I want to change your mind today. I've never heard of selfish care. I've only heard of self-care. It is a necessity because it relieves stress. I don't know about you, but when I was unemployed, I was really stressed. And it rejuvenates you and it relaxes you. And guess what? It doesn't have to cost any money, which my husband was really glad to hear about. Here are some things that you can do for gratitude, or for self-care that don't cost any money. You could go for a walk in nature. You could go with a friend or by yourself. Don't go with a friend that pushes your buttons. That's not a self-care activity. You could read an uplifting book. Psycho thrillers don't work here. You could meditate. You can journal. You can write down your gratitude. You could take a bubble bath with a do not disturb sign on the door. I made mine out of cardboard. Free. Some other things that you can do for gratitude or for self-care would be to put on some music that lifts your spirits. Dance parties, where you get to dance in your living room like nobody's watching. like you're the coolest dancer in the whole wide world. Lifts your spirits, I promise you. Now, each one of us has inside of us what I call a pot of gold. And every time we do for somebody else, a piece of gold leaves your pot. And when the pot is empty, it means you have nothing left to give. But when we keep giving from an empty pot of gold, we get resentful, we get angry, and we get tired. And the way to fill up your pot of gold is self-care activities. And what you want to put on your list are things that bring you joy. I am going to give you a minute. You'll notice here in self-care, I want you to write down as many free self-care activities that you can think of. Go. Does everybody have at least 5? Okay, I'll give you 10 more seconds. Okay, the next step to self-care after you make your list is to go home and put it on your calendar. Schedule it on your calendar and don't schedule over it. Here's what I used to do. See, as a corporate employee, I did not think I had time for self-care. That was for the people that were less ambitious than me. And when I got laid off, I didn't feel like I deserved it. Maybe if I had done some self-care while I was climbing the corporate ladder, I wouldn't have been sick when I was laid off. But you put it on your calendar and you don't schedule over it. Now here's what I did. I got my list. I put it on my calendar. It's lavender. And then when somebody would call and said they needed something, I would drop my self-care like in a minute. Here's what that does. Number 1, it says you don't matter very much. And number 2, it teaches your children the same thing so that when they grow up, they don't do any self-care either. So go home, don't throw this in your someday pile, put it on your calendar. Lavender is my color. If there's no lavender on my calendar, it is a big red flag. And my family will tell me, you need some self-care. I know. So self-care retrains your brain to think, to see that you matter. All right, here's what we've done today. We've learned how easy it is to come to the conclusion that we don't matter or to think that we have no value to the world, especially in the situation that you're in right now. That's how it was for me. I'm not even sure why I bothered that 25 years. But we've come to the conclusion we've seen how easy it is to come to that conclusion. Today, you are going to, I think I'm not on the right slide here. You matter. Okay. So we've learned some tools that can actually help turn that around. Instead of getting that information from the outside world, to get it from within. Use the turnaround. Make gratitude your lifeline. Put some self-care on your calendar. You have time. Promise you. You have time right now. If you don't, get up 15 minutes earlier. We've also learned that we have choices. And the choices that you make will determine whether you're making a difference or not. You get to be the one that decides that. When I got laid off, and after I got over the indignant thing, I thought, these people that laid me off, not only were they fools, but the people that laid me off, they did not get the right to make me feel little or to make me feel like I was unimportant. So if you feel right now like you aren't making a difference and you're struggling, I get it. I've been in your shoes. I didn't go back to a job. I decided I wasn't hireable, so I just hired myself. But I could have gone back to a job. And in fact, I did for 3 months. But I knew the minute I was there that it was the wrong place for me to be. But today, you get to make the choice about the difference that you're going to make. And the choice that you make today will determine how you show up. It'll determine the decisions you make, how you interview, and your overall happiness. My question to you is, what will you choose? Are you going to choose to look at this as an opportunity filled with possibilities? Or are you going to choose something else? I want you to know that on the very back part of your presentation or your handout, there is a feedback form. Guess what? I made it really easy for you to rip it off. And the top part of this form is for feedback. The bottom part of this form is for if you would like to stay in touch with me. Do you have to stay in touch with me? Heck no. You have choices. If there's nothing else I want you to know today, you have choices. But if you do want to stay in touch with me, you can check any of those boxes, one or all of them. All right? Will you fill this out after I finish with my parting words? Here are my parting words. Each one of you, I want you to know that each one of you was born with an unlimited supply of value. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter how many successes or failures you've had. It doesn't matter whether you're tall or vertically challenged, or whether you're employed or unemployed. You all were born with the ability to make a difference and to have a huge value to the world. I want you to pretend that I have a $100 bill up here. Can somebody in the audience tell me how much this is worth? How much is this $100 bill worth? $100. Thank you. Now, if I were to wad it up, throw it on the ground, get some dirt on it. When I pick it back up and open it up, it's now creased and it's dirty. How much is it worth? $100. We've all had experiences in our life where we have felt like we have been creased. I call them opportunistic life situations. What is it that I get to do here with this? You all make a difference in everything you do in a day. Please don't let anybody tell you differently, and please don't tell yourself differently. I want to thank you for inviting me here today. If you fill out the feedback form, I'd really appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, come on. No questions? All right. If you would fill out the feedback form, I'd really appreciate it. At the break today, I will be over here signing books. Those of you that put your name on that form and turn it in, at least with some feedback on it, you don't need to stay in touch with me, but at least with some feedback on it, I will do a drawing at the end of today for a free book. I'm going to sell my books to you for $5. $5, my cost. Any questions? All right. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for having me. Is it on?
Did you cover questions already?
I asked, but nobody
Okay.
raised their hand. I don't know
Okay.
if they're in shock or, yes.
I'd like to have know what you were director of and what field you were in.
I was in information technology. I worked in the software industry for 25 years. It's a cutthroat business, and I was one of the few women in it at that time. I know it's hard to believe that I worked 25 years. Any other questions? Yes.
Here's one, Becca.
It's like a follow-up to what she was just saying. It says in your profile or what have you before I came that you have a dear husband who supported you as you went through all that. May I just ask what he did or still does? Maybe he's retired now, as he supported you going through all that. I don't know how two corporate people.
I am quite surprised we're still married after that, but we have been married 30 years. And there were a lot of times he just listened, right? And then he would he'd turn it around. He'd use my own tools on me. He'd say, okay, so now I know everything that's going wrong. I know you had a bad day. I know that the interview didn't go well. I know you didn't get any new interviews. Okay, tell me what went right today. Well, you came home and you still love me. That's something good. I got out of my pajamas today. So that was one of the things he did. He was very supportive of me, and in his words. Then he also kicked me in the arse a few times. You know, like, where's the woman I married? Reminded me about my greatness, and that was really helpful to me, especially when we were having to short sell our house. So, and he still loved me. Any other questions?
Well, thank you so much
Thank you.
for sharing.